come once again to discuss things.
You should probably go check on him. He might have fallen down into a pit that you have to climb out of without a rope. And on that note, hi everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Geeky Gentlemen. It'll be a small affair between myself and Steve Baxey tonight, and we'll try our best not to sound pretentious. It's not going to happen though.
We try, but we make no promises.
Yeah. So anyway, Steve, what are we talking about tonight?
Okay, tonight we are talking about the very fine line between superheroes being moral exemplars and being psychotic power fantasies. How's that?
Okay. Yeah. So all right, I'm gonna interject with a brief prediction.
Ooh, cool! I love these.
This is gonna turn into a Nietzsche video. This is just going to be us talking about Nietzsche.
I could see this happening, yeah. I mean, Nietzsche's kind of a big inspiration for this topic, so...
Yeah, and my reasoning for that is, why can't they be both? That's like, why can't they be a power fantasy that's a moral exemplar? I don't see any reason that those two cannot exist in the same character.
And the only separation would be when I interject the word psychotic power fantasy.
Yeah, and I don't think you said that last week when you introduced the topic.
I did. But I think that's the big distinction, because we'll talk about this as we get there, but a lot of the worst superhero films and superhero media make that mistake of just making their character be-all, end-all badass for the sake of it without looking at what the example they're setting is, and that's the psychotic.
Yeah, that's where you get stuff like Transformers.
Yeah, that's where you get stuff like Transformers, stuff like Elektra and Catwoman, and just things that don't think about the consequences.
Certainly. Yeah, so I don't know, where do we want to really begin at this? Do we want to pick something that clearly fails besides Elektra, Catwoman, and Transformers? Do you want to try to pick things that you think succeed at doing both?
Well, I guess we should start positively and then work our way there. Because I think something that does it really, really well is the original Christopher Reeve Superman movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a power fantasy. That's totally a fantasy of, look at how amazing and perfect and beautiful this world is, and how nothing can go wrong, and how this guy is all-knowing and all-powerful in every way, but he's also very kind and gentle, and it's all about the intellectual nature of his choices. And so living vicariously through that movie is not a problem. It's exactly what that movie is intended to be.
Mm-hmm. And certainly it gets to be a problem later on in the franchise, though.
Oh, yeah. Later. I just mean, specifically the first movie.
Yeah. I'm just saying, as it goes on in the franchise, they clearly lose that balance, because Superman 4 just becomes this, slug'em fest that that loses all sense of logic, and there's nothing to really look up to. It's just this vague notion of magical world peace.
And 3 is the same way.
Yeah. But 3 has at least Richard Pryor to laugh at.
That's Superman Returns that has that to a degree, where it's not a fighting fest, but it is very much a character that's too wrapped up in his own head.
Certainly.
To a dangerous degree, that is.
You ever watch some of the trailers for Superman Returns?
No, I haven't seen those trailers in years.
Oh
it's
my
been a
God,
decade, honestly.
Yeah, there's one where they use, Marlon Brando, Jor-El, and they just make it, they go full Jesus with it, and it's, perfect. It's for this reason above all, or they can be a great people if they wish to be Kal-El. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason above all else, I have sent them you, my only son. I'm like, holy shit. And it's got, all the beauty shots in the movie, the airplane catch, the globe catch, all of it. It's the best trailer for that film, and it makes the film almost slightly more enjoyable.
Because it's a really bad movie, but I don't hate it just because of all the potential.
See, I don't think it's like awful or anything. I just think it's like, it is wasted potential. It's like if there'd been a good sequel. All right, let me put it this way. It's like if we got Star Wars, but we only got Return of the Jedi somehow.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
Like that, I've had that feeling with a lot of things. Like that's how I feel about the Legend of Zorro movie.
Right.
Like it's not the worst thing ever. It's just day late, dollar short. It took so long to get it, and then it was kind of disappointing. But if it'd come out maybe 2 years after Mask of Zorro, and then we got a third film that was better, then that would be like the Jedi of the franchise, and Superman Returns is kind of like the Jedi of the Superman franchise from the 70s.
Right. No, I can see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's like, it's not the worst thing ever, and the good stuff in it is legitimately good. It's just got a lot of problems.
Right. No, that makes sense. I guess Superman is the easy go-to, because a lot of the criticism people lob at Superman is that he's nothing but a power fantasy, which just isn't true.
I mean, certainly it's not hard to have that perspective. I think everyone kind of goes through that phase where, like, Superman isn't cool.
What I've noticed, though, and I've said this a lot, I think every time someone says something like Superman isn't cool, or Superman isn't relatable, or Superman is too dangerous in concept, it's because they haven't read enough Superman.
Certainly.
And I think that's why I want to go to this next one, and feel free to interrupt whenever you want, but I think another example that's a little bit more drastic, but I think makes this whole point go home a lot more, especially with what you said about them being both, is Tony Stark. Because Iron Man 1 and 2 are psychotic power fantasies, and Iron Man 3 is a deconstruction of that. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, of finding that right balance.
Yeah, because, I mean, he's trying his... Like, importantly, in the first two movies, they are power fantasies, I will agree with you, but they're good intentioned,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, he creates his own problems, which is always a staple of that character, but that's again, something that they become self-aware of later.
Yeah, and he's working toward... Like, what's that? It's one of the episodes of Doctor Who.
Which Doctor?
Capaldi's. Have you seen any of Series 8
Only
yet?
the first half.
Okay, so you've seen the one Into the Dalek or whatever it was called.
Yes.
Okay, he asks Clara at one point in that episode, "Do you think I'm a good man?" And eventually she tells him, "I think you try, and ultimately that's what's important."
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, so like I think that's a really good way to look at, dividing something from a power fantasy toward a moral exemplar is, what are the intentions of the character? Because Kick-Ass is totally a power fantasy.
Yeah. No, obviously.
What else? All right, you know more about this character than I do, so I'll refer to your expertise. Is Ghost Rider a power fantasy?
No.
Okay.
That's a really good example, because what makes Ghost Rider always work is when the character themselves address how the power is so intoxicating, and that they want to lose themselves in it and make it a power fantasy.
Gotcha.
Like, that's the best part of the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider, because the Danny Ketch Ghost Rider early on is all about street violence in New York and how dangerous the city is, and just the levels of crime and corruption that normal people can't fight. And so Ghost Rider fights back exactly the same way, with hardcore violence and probably some extreme measures that people like Batman and Superman would not approve of it at all.
Sure.
And the whole character arc for both Ghost Rider and for Danny is that you can't lose yourself in the power, and that it's about finding a balance somewhere. Because and I guess this is where we'll get to the Nietzsche thing, because being completely unselfish is impossible. And so you just have to kind of figure out where to curve that the most.
Certainly. I just real quick, I linked you to a toy that we have on my Works website right now. I saw it the other day. It's got a glow-in-the-dark skull.
Oh, that's really cool. It's only $6 too.
Yeah, and then handling and shipping and everything, but still.
That's not bad, though.
Yeah. This auction will be over by the time this episode is posted, everyone, so... This is just for Steve's benefit. I saw it. I'm like, oh, I should tell Steve about that. Anyway, no, like that's one of the things about Nietzsche that I think a lot of people miss, though, is the idea that, like, he always talks about the will to power and how morality is chains that enslave the Ubermensch. It's all about, the weak enslaving the strong and stuff like that. And like that's not an argument for rape.
No, obviously not.
Yeah, but people interpret it that way because it's like, oh well, if it's all about power, then why don't you just if you're just a really strong guy, then you can go out and beat people up and take their money or go out and rape someone, and so Nietzsche's advocating for that. I'm like, no, that's not it at all, because those are symptoms of someone who is weak-willed, because that's you needing to try and validate your power through oppression of others.
No, yeah, I mean, it's all
really
about...
not at all what you wanted.
Exactly. I mean, it's all about the illusion of power making something that is inherently strong weaker.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I mean, that's part of why Nietzsche wasn't philosophical canon for a while, is because the Nazis thought it was all about whoever is strongest shall live, and that's not it at all.
Yep, and people miss that. It was really funny. I took a history of 19th century philosophy class at one point.
I'm taking that right now, actually.
Oh, okay. And we had to do a paper on one of the philosophers and how they've affected the 21st century. And one guy in the class wanted to do a paper on how Nietzsche actually was about, what the Nazis wanted him to be about. And the professor told him, I'm not going to let you change your subject if you choose to do this, but you're not going to find much. And then, a week before the class ended, I hear him, talking to the professor one day, I really, really need to change my subject. I can't find anything to support this argument. It's like, you fucking warned your ass, man.
No, that's true. People have a tendency to take Nietzsche's poeticism too literally.
And I mean, to be fair, when I was first introduced to Nietzsche in class, the guy giving the lecture goes, Nietzsche is what I call a dangerous philosopher because he wrote poetically, and so there's a lot of room to misinterpret what he meant. And that's very true. But anyway, let's get back to superheroes and stuff. So yeah, Ghost Rider just seemed like one of those things where it's just it's so unadulteratedly awesome that it seems like it'd be hard for it to be anything else but a power fantasy. But what you talked about with it being about controlling yourself, about self-control, so it's kind of... I don't know, do you think it'd be fair to say that Ghost Rider can kind of be a metaphor for certain types of addiction?
Oh, yeah, absolutely it is. There's actually even a story where Danny Ketch is addicted to the Ghost Rider power called Danny Ketch Ghost Rider Addict.
Oh, nice.
And that story's awful, but that metaphor has been there since the very beginning. Because the whole thing with Ghost Rider is that, or with Danny's at least, is that his sister dies as soon as he gets the power. And so, well, not as soon as, he goes into a coma and she dies later, but the whole idea is that Danny is a really frightful, wimpy kid, and his sister's always sticking up for him, so Ghost Rider gives him both an escape from feeling guilty and the power to fight back. And so it's very much a drug addiction kind of thing.
Yeah, and Hulk has a lot of stuff done with that as well. This show is very problematic, mostly because it's just doing the same thing over and over again, but to be fair, Taylor Swift's made a career out of that.
Rimshot.
Oh, God, I watched Todd in the Shadows Top 10 of 2015, and he put 2 Taylor Swift songs on it, and I'm just like, God, drop it. She's not talented.
No, she's not.
Yeah, so anyway, Incredible Hulk, obviously every episode's the exact same story, but there is one where, Bruce Banner kind of shows up around a guy who's beating his child. And,
I remember that one.
Yeah, and it's one of the better episodes of the series, and the Hulk comes in.
Kid.
The Hulk comes in and beats the shit out of the abusive father. And, the father, as he's getting the shit kicked out of him, is, like, suddenly thrust back into the memory of his dad beating him, so it's all like this perpetuating cycle.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about the Hulk, is it is that ultimate nerd thing that everyone found so damn relatable about the guy. Is like, every kid that got bullied grown up knows that rage where you just want... There's nothing you can do, but you just wish something would let you just go berserk on these motherfuckers that are picking on you. And the Hulk is the ultimate incarnation of that feeling in a lot of ways. But importantly, I still don't think the Hulk's just a full-on power fantasy, because what I've always found most interesting about the Hulk is he is pure, unadulterated id, at least the Hulk that I prefer. He's pure, unadulterated id in the Freudian sense, but he still always wants to do the right thing.
Right.
And that's what I always loved about the Hulk is, even though he's just this ball of emotion and rage and I want this, I don't want to be around that, he always wanted to do the right thing just because it was the right thing to do.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is if you take a step back, and I guess you can almost like trace modernist to postmodern with the way this was all structured, but you go back to the original superhero comics with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and it's very much morality tales that people read as escapist fantasies that then converted themselves into fantasies of the reader, like the Hulk. Which is an interesting flow, and I wonder how much of the psychotic power fantasy side comes from trying to encapsulate the reader's experience over trying to understand what that, almost like categorical imperative-wise, what that example would set later.
Yeah.
Because the Hulk is very much... The Hulk is a metaphor before he was a character. That was the intention, is to create a metaphor for these kinds of fears and angers and emotions, and then you got the character. And Batman and Superman didn't start that way. But they became that over time.
Yeah, it's really hard to put your finger on how it all evolves and goes different places, because you want there to be just one point where that change occurred, but there's really not.
No,
it was like this subtle thing over time that developed, and I guess it really starts to change mostly in the Silver Age, where you had the kids that were reading the Golden Age comics come in and start writing them. I think that's why you've gotten just a general improvement in quality of storytelling over the decades, is because mainly the people that were reading the comics are the ones that start writing them. And so I'm always curious what'll happen now, because, despite how the last couple of years haven't been great, but overall this era of comics has been fantastic. They're calling it the platinum era now, the 80s till the present, and I tend to agree with that.
It'll be interesting to see how that goes going forward, because we seem to be getting stuck in patterns pretty often, but that doesn't stop us from getting really interesting runs.
Yeah,
because Grant Morrison's Batman, we both love that, but that's very much about the history of that character, but also putting yourself in his shoes and seeing what kind of teacher Batman would actually be. That's exactly what the Leviathan Strikes Batgirl issue was about, with all the pop stars as teachers.
Oh, that's just the kookiest shit in the world. I love it.
It's fantastic. But again, that's also the point of Batman Incorporated, which is just proliferate a Batman example, and what would that look like? Specifically when you open it with Batman, Bruce Wayne losing himself in Batman, and you break down power fantasy from there.
I've got to see if I can find this panel. It's like my favorite thing from the Batman Incorporated book, where he gives this like epic ass speech.
Was that New 52 Batman Inc. or before?
I think it was before. It's like, from this day on, evil will have no place left to hide, because there will always be Batman.
Oh, isn't that Batman Robin 16 when that idea first shows up?
I don't know if it's like when it first shows up, but it's one of the issues of Batman Inc. I'm certain, and he's like giving a speech about what he basically gives the corporate mission statement of Batman Inc.
Because I know he does that in Batman and Robin, but that might be different.
Yeah. No, that's not it. Damn it. Google image search needs to be better at reading my mind.
Everything needs to be better at reading our minds.
Yeah, you know?
It's making things so much easier.
Like, I wanted to do a commercial for Batman Inc. and have someone voice Batman and read that little speech he gives and just, you know, have the bat signal kick on or something.
Right.
Batman Inc. was so cool. I'm so pissed at DC for getting rid of it.
Batman Inc. as well. It's such a good idea. But anyway.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. I guess I'll mention the elephant in the room because I know we really disagree about this, but it'd be weird to have this conversation and not bring it up. I think the fundamental problem with Man of Steel is that Superman in that movie is nothing but a psychotic power fantasy. That he doesn't actually stand for anything except might makes right.
See, I would disagree with that because, like, all that dude wants to do is help people from the very beginning of that movie.
But he's so bad and vindictive about it. Like, my favorite example to go to is you have the bar scene where the dude's being a jerk, and Clark works at a bar. So, obviously, in his job description would probably be to throw out rowdy drunk people, but he doesn't do that. So, we're supposed to get this whole high road message of, oh, look, he didn't use his power to intimidate this jackass. But then he demolishes his truck.
See,
and
like,
that's
for me,
just petty. And then he keeps doing that throughout the movie. Like, even if he comes away with the right lesson of hope at the end, the movie's not showing you that. The movie is showing you if he wants something, he will force a situation where it works. His whole revealing himself to the world thing doesn't come on his own terms. It comes because Zod's demanding it, and at that point, no one has any other choice but to accept it. And he just kind of worms his way into it. It's not really about any sort of inspiration or hope or morality. It's about, it's convenient for me because I'm better than you.
I disagree with that. Like, okay, so the truck thing never bothered me because it definitely gets across what it needs to get across, which is that he's still dealing with all this shit and he doesn't really know where to funnel his human, like, feelings, I suppose I'll call them. He knows that he can't hurt people because he doesn't want to hurt people. But from the very beginning of that movie, you know, the first scene we get with, you know, proper Clark Kent is him rescuing the guys off the oil rig. And that's all he wants to do with his whole life is always just been to fucking help people. Because, like, you know, like, he looks back to when he was a kid and his dad was telling him that you can't do it, it'll ruin your life, you'll have to live on the run and everything, and that's exactly what ends up happening. He constantly has to save people because he just can't help himself from doing it, and every time he does it he has to keep on moving on, and eventually it starts to go back and bite him in the ass when Lois Lane tracks him down.
It doesn't actually bite him in the ass.
Well, I mean, he's able to talk her out of it, but if it hadn't been Lois Lane...
I don't know. Like, see, that's the thing where it comes down to an example. Like, the opening scene where he's saving people on an oil rig, he's already made the choice that he is going to blatantly help people whenever he wants to, and he's not good at hiding his tracks, and in several places he doesn't even try. And then we get the flashback to when his dad's saying he perhaps shouldn't help people. So you set up the theme of Superman doesn't know where he belongs after you already understand exactly what he wants and where he belongs. And then everything after that is just is the universe confirming what he wants and not any sort of internal struggle. Like, it says it's an internal struggle, but that's not really what it is. Like, the whole thing with him in handcuffs and the interrogation, that's not about hope. That's not about him revealing himself to the world. That's not about him finding his place as Superman. That's Zod's already made the hard task of revealing himself to the world done, and then no one has any other choice but to follow his lead, because what else are they going to do? And then over and over again, that's what happens. Every time there's a problem, Superman shows up and they listen to him, because what else are they going to do?
Because at least he's trying to do the right thing, though.
Okay, but he's doing the right thing, and no one has a chance to argue with him, because literally, what else could you do? I mean, The problem is, Superman never has a sacrificial moment in that movie, where there's never a moment in that movie where he risks everything on its own terms. Everything comes based off someone else's risk and problems. Like,
what about when he almost dies trying to fight the other end of the world engine on the in the Indian Ocean?
I mean, that's just a feat of his strength. Like, that's not like a moral resolve kind of thing. Like,
no, but I mean, he knows that he's very nearly sacrificing his life to try and do that.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, that's not a moral resolve thing, though. Like, that's not him deciding in that moment, I will be Superman and a symbol of hope. That's just him trying to live.
No, I disagree with that, because he's putting his life on the line the same way that he's asking the other people in Metropolis to put their lives on the line by delivering the ship to the other side of the world engine.
But again, it just comes down to an example thing. Like, I think the whole problem with that movie is that the example is nothing but might makes right. If you have the ability to do it, then you ought to do it, and nothing more than that. Like, there's never a moment where his need...
No, I disagree with that, because Zod's whole argument is might makes right, and Superman's like, no, might just means you can do it, not that you should.
No, because Superman uses that excuse way too much. There's so many situations where the only leverage is he's stronger, and so the plan goes from him. I mean, the movie's trying to be what you're saying thematically, but that's not what they're showing us. That's not Superman ever on its own terms. Everything's always platted out. Everything's already set for him, and then he reacts.
See, I don't know if I really thing is, I just gave up on trying to argue with people about Man of Steel. I just decided I'm going to enjoy the movie for what I enjoy about it.
That's fair. I mean, I'm not trying to change your mind about it. It's just a matter of,
I'm just saying, like, I don't have like a perfect counter argument to everything. I'm just like, okay, what you're saying I disagree with, and I can look at these things as evidence. What you're talking about with, like, the whole thing of it's all a power fantasy. See, I don't know, because certainly part of me wants to agree with you, especially when we talk about the truck being destroyed, because one of my things that, like, Bill and I did a video on this of top 5 tropes that I like, and one of them for me is bullies getting their comeuppance. I fucking love that trope. I don't care how much it's done to death. And that guy in the fucking bar, yeah, I wanted him to get the shit kicked out of him or something.
And he totally deserved it.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, like, what precedent does that set in a movie about hope?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It is a problematic movie that has a really hard time showing people what it wanted to show them as opposed to what it actually showed them.
Exactly, and I mean, you can like that movie all you want. Anyone can. I'm not trying to change your mind about it. It's just a matter of, if you really try to break down the moral code of that movie as it's demonstrated and not as it wishes it was, it's a very dangerous, almost fascist kind of thing.
See, I would stop there. Or not stop. I would back off from that just a little bit, because I don't feel like it advocates for fascism, particularly because the whole thing is about fighting people who are trying to oppress and force their will upon you with absolutely no regard for anyone else.
But then they end on that note where Superman drops a satellite where he very easily could have killed the general and says, look, you have to trust me because you have to trust me because I'm me.
See, I don't think he...
Because that's exactly what he does.
It's one of those
Superman lets the general take everything on his word, because what is the general going to do but listen to him? And if he doesn't, he'll get smashed into the ground like the satellite.
No, come on, it's Superman.
I know,
now.
That's because we know Superman. That's got nothing to do with that person getting a sense of trust from him. It all comes down to, if you were in that situation in that car, you would be intimidated. And that's the example. That's not... Again, thematically, I get what you're saying. It's just, that's the example, and that's the dangerous part.
Fair enough. No, like, the whole satellite thing, I never understood the complaint about, because I was just like, yeah, but I mean, it's Superman. He's got control over that thing. I'm sure he isn't trying to kill the guy. He's just showing him, hey, listen, I could do this, but you need to trust me that I'm not going to.
Right.
I put my life on the line for you guys. You need to trust me that I'm going to keep doing that.
Right, but I mean, it's being on the other end is the problem. Like, even if someone makes a dramatic example of smashing your car and says, don't worry, I might not, it doesn't matter if you can trust them or what their personality is or what they're thinking in their head. In that moment, you're pissing your pants.
Okay, the only problem with that argument, though, and I kind of want to end it here so this doesn't turn into a Man of Steel review.
Oh, sure, obviously, yeah.
The only problem with that argument is it's taking the perspective that you're not doing anything to provoke him, and to be fair, the American military was trying to spy on him. So there is a certain dynamic of, listen, just let me do my thing. I promise I'm going to do the right thing. And, so far he hadn't done anything personally against the interests of the planet.
And my only counter to that would be that movie's trying to have its cake and eat it too, where Superman revealing himself to the world is done through the U.S. military. So the U.S. military is an allegory for humanity. And so in that scene, it's both a military thing and a humanity thing. And at that point, it doesn't work. It falls apart.
Okay. Fair enough. And like I said, I just don't want to turn it into
No,
Man of
obviously.
Steel.
But I guess it's the elephant in the room. Like, someone was going to have to mention it eventually. If we didn't talk about it, it's going to be in the comments.
Of course. All right, so, I found my Batman panel.
Which comic was it?
I don't know the issue. It's just got it, on a website somewhere with the one isolated panel. So, I'm just going to read it because I fucking love this speech.
Cool.
Starting today, we fight ideas with better ideas. The idea of crime with the idea of Batman. From today on, Batman will be everywhere it's dark. No place to hide. I fucking love that speech.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think that's Leviathan Strikes, now that I'm thinking about it.
Maybe, I don't know, off the top of my head.
But no, that's a fantastic speech, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That's exactly what superheroes are.
Yeah. Oh, we fight ideas with better ideas. I love that.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the mission statement of Morrison's Batman.
Right?
No, I love that. And again, it goes back to what you said earlier about power fantasy and moral exemplar being in the same place, because Batman Incorporated has struck that great balance of being a fun, escapist, almost golden agey book, while also being about Batman as a moral guide. Mm-hmm. And it never faltered in trying to strike that balance. There was never a moment where Batman stepped too far over the line or it was too preachy. It always got that point across that if you want to get rid of bad people, then make more Batman. Mm-hmm. And it's both literal and figurative, and I love that.
Yeah. God. All right, so I'm trying to think of what do you think is an example, just unarguably this is a horrible example of a hero and clearly is just power fantasy without any idea of any kind of morality, and there's no reason we should be looking up to them. Because I can't think of many from the modern era, but I can think of plenty from the classical era of mythology.
Modern era is tough, yeah. Because I think we've kind of realized that idea more and more, so I can't think of anything, recent.
Yeah, because, you think about it, and most of the heroes do stand for something.
Yeah.
You can get into the 90s stuff, and there's where you'll start to get some stuff that's done poorly, but, what do they call that? The rule of charity in a debate where you try to give the best possible characterization of your other side.
Oh, yeah.
But, so even when you look at, characters that are clearly just power fantasy, most of the time, they do still have good issues here and there that, get to the heart of what the character's about. I'm tempted to say stuff like Deadpool and Punisher, but no, they're still about something. They still have some kind of moral guidance or thought behind them. It's just shrouded in a lot of bad stuff. But when I think of classical mythology, it's filled with things where the heroes are just absolute power fantasies, and the moral is not to be like them.
I think Beowulf has got that quite a bit.
Yeah, Hercules and Beowulf.
Yeah. I mean, when I was first reading it, my comparison was, so if I was in ancient Greece, then Beowulf would be like the porn, yes? Just violence for the sake of violence and disgust for the sake of disgust, right?
Yeah.
I never liked Beowulf. Ugh.
What about the CGI movie that didn't need to be in CGI? Did that do it for you?
not entirely. No, Beowulf's like that. Like you said, Hercules is like that.
Yeah, because I mean, Hercules is fucking awesome as shit. Like, but he does a lot of really, really terrible things. Like, even when he's not, under Hera mind control, he straight up rapes Hippolyta.
Yeah. I mean, most of the Greek gods in general have got that. Like, I feel like everyone's raped someone at some point.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's just how you met your wife back in the day. If in old what do they call that, Mycenaean era Greece?
I mean, Hades was the nicest about it.
Yeah, I mean, he at least gave the bitch some fruit first.
Good guy Hades.
Yeah. One thing I really like about the Legends of Wonder Woman book that's just started up, I think it's like 6 issues. They actually do address the mythology of Hippolyta sleeping with who is it? Theseus and Hercules.
That's cool.
And like she wanted a daughter for so long, and she was sure that those two could give her, or wanted a child for so long, and she was sure those two could give one to her, and it just didn't happen.
That's interesting.
So that was a nice way to address the mythology. I'm always bothered by Wonder Woman stuff that like doesn't address the Greek mythology. I'm like, but she's like the character that bridges those two things for me, because she has the moral values of our modern heroes to some extent or another, but connects to those ancient heroes, and I really like that about her. But yeah, a lot of all the heroes in ancient myth are just awful.
Yeah, no, they're horrible, and we've gotten a pretty good distance away from that. Like, to think of a superhero mythological kind of thing that's anywhere remotely as bad as that, I still have to go back at least 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Even the bad stuff that's come in the meantime hasn't been completely unaware of itself.
Yeah, it's poorly done. It's not awful,
Yeah, like Spider-Man 3 is pretty awful in all regards, but like it's at least it's acknowledging itself in places, and we have things like Spider-Man 2 that make us understand why that movie doesn't work.
Yeah. God, what's like... I'm just trying to think of something where just it totally misses everything. And there's just no way to defend it whatsoever. And I guess you said it earlier. I think Catwoman's probably a good example of that, because it even... I don't know how you mess up such a vanilla feminist message, but it does.
Yeah, I mean, that movie's only on my mind because the commentary... Captain Duke did on it recently, but yeah.
That had a really, really disturbing title.
That did. I loved the crap out of that.
Oh my god, Cap in a 60s Catwoman outfit was really weird.
I never thought I'd see that.
Yeah, me neither.
But no, yeah, Catwoman is one of those Elektra's that only to a lesser degree, because at least she dies first.
Okay.
Like, she has some consequence, but not a lot.
No, Catwoman's just like, it's not even really a Catwoman movie.
No, it's not.
It's just
not
so many things wrong with that. Like, I don't understand why it's so hard to make a good Catwoman movie. Make a heist film.
Make a heist film with a woman in a sexy catsuit. How hard is that?
Right?
Like, you would think people would be all over this shit, but I guess not.
I would kill for a Catwoman movie where Ben Affleck's Batman gets to, like, be the, be part of the whole plan. That'd be so cool.
Oh,
like,
that'd be awesome.
Where, because there's always, like, that element in the heist movie where there's the, detective or law enforcement type character that's, like, gonna break it up at the last second, but he ends up being played and ends up, like, unwittingly participating in it. I would love to see him do that shit. That would be so perfect.
So basically just adapt that Riddler arc we talked about.
Yeah. I like that stuff.
No, you're right. The Transformers movies you mentioned earlier, but I think over time they've gotten more and more aware of the fact that they are just total crap.
Yeah, I think, what is it? The second one's just half an hour of explosions.
Something like, I don't know. I couldn't finish that movie. I didn't watch anything past the second one, but from what I hear, they get more and more just preposterous in a good way.
Fair enough. I'll take your word for it.
I don't give a shit about them, so... But that's probably what they are. You mentioned Kick-Ass. Kick-Ass 2 was definitely that way. That was a hard movie to get through.
That's disappointing, because that first movie, it was kind of a smart critique of the whole genre, at least.
Yeah, and same with the first comic. It's just after that, it kind of became too Mark Millar.
You know, it's weird when that kind of stuff, like, it didn't happen as much with Boondocks, but Boondocks has a little of that. Where, like, it was saying something, and in doing so, it was parodying other things, and then people just didn't quite get it, but it got really popular for the parody stuff. So it just became more about the parody stuff than the commentary. Like, Boondocks still remained pretty good. It didn't happen to that as much as it did to things like Kick-Ass, but it certainly, you know, it lost some of its teeth after that first season.
Yeah, I mean, I still think Boondocks stayed pretty strong for a while. It's just like, it's like you said, it kind of went off message, I think.
Well, like, they had the first season, you can really tell they thought that's all they were ever going to get.
Yeah.
And then, like, it goes on, and, like, I enjoyed the fourth season of Boondocks, where it's just a gigantic parody of Breaking Bad with Granddad, but there's not much commentary in it at that point. It's kind of just the silly fun part of the Boondocks thing, which, you know, that's the heart of the show, but at the same time, there's the soul of the show was the social commentary stuff.
Which I think a lot of people argue is a problem with later Family Guy.
Yeah, because that just became, like, absolute trash cutaway gags.
Right. And, I mean, it didn't start that way. I mean, the cutaway gags were always there, but at least there was some more class to it early on that they just lost.
Yeah, and it just got to a certain point where they're like, how shocking can we get?
How much time can we cut away from the main story?
Yeah.
Without just making another episode.
Yeah.
Those chicken fights got fucking ridiculous.
And it's weird because it was so much fun at first because it was like, holy shit, this has gone on for a really long time. But then it kept coming back so often. It's like there was a chicken fight every season, and sometimes more than once a season. It just got to be too much.
They lost the point of it. Which I think maybe this is another, and this would be like more of a step away from the topic itself, but I think this just comes to the power of fiction, because at the end of the day, at the end of every argument, at the end of every discussion, you want to just say, don't take it that seriously. It's just a movie. It's just a TV show. It's just a book. At the same time, it's not. So, you and I would never have heated, beat the crap out of each other arguments over Man of Steel. It's just a movie. No one cares.
Yeah. I'm not in love with that. You know, if you tried to throw arguments like that against Dark Knight, we will beat the shit out of each other. But
yeah, we wouldn't have severe personal problems with each other just because we don't agree on a movie.
Certainly.
But at the same time, I threw this example out a couple of weeks ago. Something like Angel is it's at the core of my being, and so the power fantasy, the psychotic power fantasy, and the moral exemplar stuff. That isn't us injecting morals and ideas, or writers injecting morals and ideas into narrative. That's just narrative being more of itself.
Yeah, and I think part of it just comes from, you know, when you have characters that are, especially with superheroes, they're all fighting crime in one way or another, you know, even if they're just out saving the universe from, you know, galactic threats, they're trying to help people, they're trying to carry out justice. So you kind of have to talk about the whole morality thing. Whereas with older mythology stuff, it was just, let's look at Hercules do this cool shit. And, well, he pissed off the gods, so now he has to suffer, and it just became a cycle like that.
And then importantly, ancient mythology does start as, maybe not directly this way, but a lot of it was there to kind of instill a very consistent mindset. Some of it was fear-mongering. Some of it was don't step out of line because of this story.
Oh, I mean, certainly. We were talking about Hades and Persephone. You know, what was Persephone doing when she was, you know, it was called the rape of Persephone. What was Persephone doing when she was raped? she was a little girl out in the field picking flowers. So what do you, as an ancient Greek father, why would you tell your daughter a story like that? So she's afraid to go out in the field alone to pick flowers because someone might kidnap and rape her. That was the whole purpose of that story.
I mean, and we haven't really gotten away from this. Like, the Boogeyman, Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, like those...
What? Those are all real, right?
Yeah, they're totally real. But I mean, like that...
Oh, good. You scared me for a second there.
But I mean, we do that. Stories have power over people, and I love the way Joss Whedon talks about this. Joss Whedon saying that since memories are not like a finite, perfect recording in your mind, and it's always about reconstruction, in your day-to-day life, not only are you consuming stories and narrative, but your entire life is you telling a story about yourself. Because you're remembering things, and because you're trying to figure things out, and you're trying to connect things from your past to your present to your future. Life in itself is a constant narrative framework. And then we escape into more well-bound narrative frameworks. So it's both good and bad to get too sucked into a story. I think that's why this topic came up, is because if that's the case, if it's the case that stories have that much power over you, then we ought to have good stories, or at least morally pure stories, or at least stories that try not to make you crazy.
Certainly, and like it's weird because I always think about, what is the blue collar guy that just likes to go to work, watch football, grill, I guess. What does he think about these really complex issues, or do they?
Yeah.
You always have philosophers talking about what did what's his name? Medieval era, real son of a bitch, French.
So everyone, you haven't narrowed it down yet.
Yeah, every single French person.
Every single French medieval philosopher, right there.
Yeah, Voltaire, I think.
Was Voltaire medieval?
And medieval Renaissance-ish.
Yeah, Voltaire is a pompous ass, but yeah.
Yeah, like he referred to normal people as das Rabble, and just every philosopher at some point just kind of dismisses the masses, as they don't care, they're not interested, they're stupid, kind of thing. But then they all try to make these really positive points about the power of the human spirit, and I never understand how they can have those two ideas. It's either everyone's capable of it, or only some people are capable of it, and you can't have it both ways. But regardless of that, I always wonder what your average Joe Schmo, if these kinds of issues of identity and of the importance of stories and what our stories say about us as opposed to what we say about our stories, what effect that has on them. What effect does your favorite movie have on you as a person,
Yeah.
I'm really curious, how do people react to that, or do they even bother to think about it? Do we just sit here as intellectuals and just ponder away things for so long that no one else would ever conceive of, or are we just the only ones good enough to put it into words, and try our best to communicate the ideas out there? Does everyone have these thoughts, they just don't know how to get around it? They haven't trained themselves to think about their thinking on this level.
Well, I mean, not everyone wants to talk about it, and part of it is just, and this is something that's been bugging me for a while now. It's just life has a way of moving you away from these kinds of conversations. You get to a certain age, and you have a family, you have kids, you have work, you have obligations, and the obligations take over to the point where you can't afford to sit there and just philosophize about Voltaire and Nietzsche for an hour. And you want to. It's in your being, but you can't. You don't have time. But that doesn't stop those perspectives and those ideas from dwelling in you somewhere. So if you haven't watched it, there's this really great documentary that came out, God, what year was it? 2008, I think, called The Examined Life. And everyone uses this clip, but it's a really great clip. The opening 10 minutes of it is Cornel West sitting in a car talking to the documenter, and they couldn't get Cornel West for more than just like 10 minutes. So they offered to drive him to where he was going, and they just have a conversation with him. And so they just run that whole thing for the opening of the documentary. And he has this bit where he's looking out into the streets of New York, and everyone's just kind of walking, not looking at cell phones and stuff like that. And he says, these people, they aren't really alive. And he makes a really interesting point throughout that whole opening, that there's a different kind of life in simply behaving in the world, doing what you're supposed to do, and being alive in a book, and being so blown away by an idea that you have to stop and take a walk and re-examine your life because of a couple of words on a page. And
there's a movie, I can never remember the name of this movie, but like we watched it once in a philosophy class and we all laughed our fucking asses off. There's a scene in a cafe, like just a little reading, kind of busy coffee shop, and you just see one dude in the background, and he's sitting there reading that gigantic tome of Being and Time by Heidegger.
Oh.
And I'm just like, we all just laugh our asses off because there's no way you could do that. You can't be around people and in a social environment and just lightly read along with that. That takes like just so much immense concentration, and you just have to really try at it. And Heidegger doesn't make it easy for you at all.
No.
So you have to pour yourself into that in every single capacity. And this dude's just in the background flipping through it. And no one gets why this is funny except Steve and I.
No. Read Being and Time. I dare you. That book will piss you the fuck off.
Anything Heidegger wrote will piss you the fuck off. Heidegger's grocery list will piss you the fuck off.
See, I love that because Deleuze wrote an entire argument against Heidegger based off nothing but a grocery list.
Oh, that's perfect.
I know, it was fantastic.
Oh, man. No, but like, so yeah, the idea that you have a tendency to kind of just check out, and tune out of whatever, like, your deepest thoughts are, and so when you start to dig into these things, that's why people say, oh, what are you smoking, whenever they talk about philosophy, or whenever they say, oh, I've done plenty of philosophy when I got high.
Yeah, I mean, they get to that stereotype, and I think it's important that just because you can't put these experiences or ideas into words or categories or groups like philosophy, it doesn't mean that the thoughts don't occur to people. And I mean, I've noticed a lot of people that, like, I think part of this comes from watching Frasier, but like, you look at Frasier, you look at Niles, and you look at their dad, and just because Frasier and Niles have this long-winded intellectual experience and ability to articulate everything so perfectly, it doesn't make their dad any dumber than them. It doesn't make their dad's experiences any different than theirs.
Yeah, I mean, he's often sometimes the smartest one in the room.
Yeah, I mean, he's more often than not the only guy that's right about certain things, and he has the same thing they do, where they need to go to the opera, he needs to watch his football games, but it's the same kind of relaxing experience. It's the same kind of urges and narratives in each other's minds working, because if you get so invested in something like a sport, then if your favorite team wins, you're happy. It controls your emotion. It controls the way you see the rest of your day, just like if you read a really good book or you read a really bad book. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's just the narrative structure is different.
Yeah, and so that makes me curious about things like sports movies.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah, Rocky, come on.
Yeah, it really shouldn't work, but it does, because you're mixing two things that ultimately serve the same purpose, but in completely different ways. So they shouldn't fit together as well as they do, but they always, I mean, not always, but they often work out really well. And it's weird for me because, like, I can genuinely enjoy a sports movie, but I can never really enjoy a sport. Like,
no, same here.
we play like UFC and boxing sometimes on the station before we go on for the news, and so I end up watching some of it. I'm just like, these guys are just hugging or rolling around on the floor. This looks more like I should be hiding this from my mom and questioning my sexuality right now, as opposed to, cheering with a crowd. But whatever. It's a thing that people get into, but when I watch, like Rocky, or what did we do? We did Undisputed 1 and 2 a couple months ago.
Oh yeah, those movies are awesome.
Yeah, those are just fucking awesome, and like maybe it's just because it's all like timed and choreographed, and there's a kick-ass score, and it all like builds up. But man, it's just so much more enjoyable to watch that on a screen, like after it's all been edited and everything, than to try to watch it in like live. It always, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting, particularly with things like martial arts. I've got a friend who's really, really into Bruce Lee, and he loves Bruce Lee's philosophy, and he's debating whether or not to do his thesis on how Bruce Lee's martial arts philosophy conveys modern feminist ideas. And the crazy part is that he's getting this really coherent and intelligent argument out of nothing but like well choreographed Bruce Lee fight scenes.
Bruce Lee was a really interesting dude,
but he's fantastic. But I mean, like that just speaks to the point of like not everything has to have a dramatic speech or a big ensemble cast to grant the same philosophical notions in people.
Yeah, it's funny. What's the one? Major League.
Which one is that?
Charlie Sheen's in it.
Oh, yeah. The baseball.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. There's that scene at the end where the one guy has to run to steal the base, and I always remember this. It was like it had to be the 1,000th time my mom had watched this movie. It had just happened to be on cable that day, and it's right at the end with the climax, and you got the music swelled and everything. And this dude runs to steal the base, and my mom just starts cheering for him. It's like, go, 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 go! And she'd seen the movie before. She knew that they were going to win the game, but she still cheered for him nonetheless. It's such a weird thing, and like I don't know how much this has to do with our original topic at this point, but it's something I find infinitely fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, before we go back to that more properly, like that's what happened when I saw Creed in the theaters. People were acting like they were actually at a boxing match. They were chanting the name. They were clapping. There was a standing ovation when that movie was over, and it didn't matter how many times I saw it. That was always the reaction.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I guess that just speaks to the power of things. I think that goes back into what we were saying, where if a movie or a sport or just social interaction at all can do that to a person, then it's really, really dangerous when we get stuff with overtly immoral messages. And then I know people are going to like say, well, how do you know what's right and what's wrong? I don't like breaking things down to that relative stake, because it doesn't matter what philosophy you subscribe to. You put Kant, Nietzsche, David Hume, all those guys in a room together, they'll all do the same thing. They'll just have different reasons for why, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's why all that's important, is because you don't want to mass produce or commercialize things like Rocky if it's all about beating the crap out of people that are weaker than you.
Yeah, and that's why it's like really weird, the kind of media that we do see a lot. Like, you hear in school, and I don't really want to get into questioning this or anything like that, but the idea that, if you sleep with someone when they're drunk, then it can be considered rape.
Yeah.
But how many times have you seen TV shows and movies treat that kind of situation like it's perfectly normal?
Yeah.
And totally acceptable. Like, I remember being in high school, and a cop came in to give a lecture about what sexual boundaries were and stuff. It was smart to do that. And he asked us that question, like, if you're both drunk and you guys have sex, is it okay? And, majority of the class answered yes. And he goes, actually, no, it's not. And, legally that is considered rape still. And I'm like, not questioning whether or not that should be, given, our standards for other things you do while you're drunk.
Yeah.
It's still weird that our media portrays that as if it's perfectly acceptable.
Well, I mean, you've got that with relationship stuff in media all the time. Like when you get those really stereotypical love triangles, and no one behaves like a rational human being for the sake of that story narrative. And then I love Don John for this, because Don John's a Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie where the guy's addicted to porn, but then his girlfriend's addicted to romantic comedies, and the movies are all about, well, what's the difference?
Nothing.
Exactly. Exactly, and I think that's part of this situation where what kind of expectations is your entertainment putting on you as far as society and boundaries go?
Certainly, and it's one of those things because like there's so many little things like that we see as acceptable are shown displayed as acceptable in television now. But you go back and you look at old commercials or old TV from the 40s and 50s and stuff, and the famous example I guess is 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Camel brand cigarettes.
Oh yeah.
That's really weird to see now, because everyone knows smoking isn't healthy, but that certainly creates the impression that it is, and it makes you start to question the things that you see with medication ads now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and to a degree, some of that's just a work in progress, because we don't always know what's right and what's wrong in every situation. A lot of that has to evolve.
Culture is always evolving.
Exactly. You're not going to get a movie right now that's the be-end-all definition of what intellectual property is, because we still don't know.
I mean, like, we're certainly dealing with a lot of other issues right now, like, a lot of things are starting to take on transgender issues.
Yeah, transgender issues, race, police brutality. These are all complicated, and we don't exactly have we don't have the encapsulation of that in just one movie.
Mm-hmm. And it's getting really hard to narrow down what's supposed to be what, and that's simultaneously fascinating, but also really weird to see how quickly it could shift the wrong way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I think some of us come to rely on that too, right? Like a lot of people want they want the best case politics represented in a movie before it's represented anywhere else. And I think to a degree this is important. I think if your entertainment is diverse and good and moral, then your society becomes that way. But that's why it's important for things like the Wonder Woman movie to be good. That's why it's important for things like the Black Panther movie to happen and be good.
Yeah, and it really makes me wonder, I guess to tie it back to philosophy and go ancient again, do you think Plato might have been onto something given his time period of no art?
Yes and no, because I mean, and this is another Cornel West thing that I like that he quotes. Plato bans the flute in the Republic, but on his deathbed he asks for one, and he's right, because Plato doesn't ban art in the Republic because he doesn't like it. He bans it because it's really powerful and it's really dangerous, and they don't know how to regulate it. Mm-hmm. And that's smart, but how much of the human experience can you really have without that?
Certainly, and it's just an interesting idea, because, given the mythology of Plato's time, he didn't want people to learn about that kind of thing, and do you think he would change his mind given the mythology of our time?
I think he absolutely would. Just based on what he was working with at the time, because Plato grew up after Athens was no longer the shining, glorious capital be-all end-all city it was. So... Mm-hmm. I think he would probably have more of a cynical view on art and drama and literature than he would now.
Yeah, it's a really weird thing. Like, I always think about that. I think I mentioned this last week too. I was thinking about what would I do if I had to explain, our current culture and world to someone who had no idea what they were looking at. Like, if I went back and just took Plato to the modern times and I had to fucking explain everything.
Yeah.
That would get so fucking difficult. Because, just getting past all the little things, like, what the fuck are roads and cars?
Yeah.
And microwaves. I don't even know how the fuck I would begin to explain microwaves, because you'd have to get through electricity, then radiation.
Yeah. Just imagine the internet.
Yeah.
Well, hang on a second. You have all of the human knowledge right here at your fingertips, and you are still fighting with each other?
It's a series of tubes. Oh man, yeah, I'd probably just get burned as a witch or something.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying last time about being the guy that has to answer the door when the aliens show up.
Yeah, what do you tell him, man? Um, anyway, no, like I think about how would these great minds, quote unquote, view us today, and it really makes you start to question what values you place on certain things.
Yeah, no, sir.
I don't know. It's one of those interesting things, and so our heroes, I think, ultimately reflect our values and our ideas and our perceptions of ourself, and they reflect, like you were saying, the best possible version of that, or at least they should.
They attempt to, and I mean, I think part of that reflection is that it's really difficult for us to not just take our understanding and then push it to its most furthest extreme when we're making these heroes. Like, Superman is not objectively the most moral person on the face of the earth. He is what we understand to be moral in its furthest extreme, which is why there are versions of that character that are better or more moral than others.
Yeah.
So if you get a person that doesn't understand right and wrong to write Superman, then it's not going to be the same thing.
What's his face? That's the big LGBT anti-activist.
The Orson Scott Card.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I think that's the video, Steve.
I think so. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot here, so we kind of went pretty broad.
Yeah. I don't know what else I can say to that. Is, our heroes are what we wish ourselves to be, and ultimately when you look at what we see as heroes, well, the majority of what we see as heroes now, I think that's a pretty positive thing overall.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I love bringing up...
I can't think of anything, like, overtly negative on the whole. Like, there's always an argument to be made somewhere right now, from what's come to my head right this second. And if you don't agree with me, then go in my head, come back out, and tell me I'm wrong. But yeah, I don't know. I think we're in a pretty good state right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part I think we understand these issues a lot more, and so no one's going out of their way to make a superhero movie denying that they have political and moral ramifications, which is something that was certainly happening for a while in the early 2000s and the 90s and stuff.
Yeah, because it couldn't be smart. It had to just be dumb.
Exactly. And I think we've gotten away from that. Even if every movie we may make isn't great, we still kind of understand that. Like, whether or not you agree with the situation or not, it's really fascinating to me that independent of each other, Edward Snowden and Captain America made the exact same argument about surveillance. I mean, that says something right there. You don't have to read into it any further than that.
Yeah, I agree. Man,
almost word for word too. I kind of love that.
Yeah, it's a weird world we live in, man. Okay, so what are we going to talk about next week? We need a review topic. I'm gonna come up with something.
Yeah, because I picked Filth and I picked this, so I don't know. I don't think I'm tapped out for a little while.
Nah, that's fine. Dude, I really want to talk about something Zorro related.
Let's talk Zorro related. I love Zorro. Who doesn't love Zorro?
Okay.
We should get Alex on if we're going to do Zorro, though.
Oh, that'd be fun.
He loves him, too.
Yeah, I know. He and I have talked about him a little bit. I'm trying to think of something that'd be, like, easy to do.
Something on Netflix, maybe?
There's only the 1930 film.
Okay.
Let's see here. What about... I really want to talk about the Django Zorro book, but I don't know if you'd be able to get a hold of that.
I can check. Is it in trade yet or no?
I don't know. I'd assume so. It's been out for like a year almost.
Let me check. If it's on Amazon, I can see if I can buy it. It'll take a couple days to get here.
Yeah. Could I send you the scans?
You could send me that too. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, I'll download it and send you scans.
Okay. Well,
you didn't hear that, internet.
That's cool. Go ahead and send me those. That'll be easier.
Yeah. Because I really want to talk about that. I want to talk about something Zoro related, and I think that's a nice, like, popular thing.
Yeah. I mean, I love Django, and Zoro is awesome, and that's written by Matt Wagner, I think. So. Matt
Wagner and Tarantino.
I mean, that's perfect. Who else would you want but those two?
Exactly. So yeah, we'll talk about that, and we'll see who else can join us for that one. Because I've really been wanting to talk about Zoro for a while. Right now, I'm reading through the Isabella Allende novel.
How is that?
It's pretty good. Interestingly, she is from South America, so she gets a lot of the Native American history side of it really well done and right on. She has them go on a vision quest, and it's not like, the typical kind of Hollywoody, hallucinations and stuff. It's weird things that kind of happen when you're dehydrated and shit out in the fucking wilderness. So yeah, there's shit like that I really like. At the same time, I don't know how I feel about her characterization of Alejandro, but it gets really hard to write Zoro as, both a proper Spanish gentleman and a member of or sympathetic with the tribes.
Right.
And not kind of shit on one of them.
Right.
Like, it gets really, really hard to walk that line at a certain point. But anyway, we'll go ahead and talk about Django Zoro, because that's only like 6 issues. So
cool. I mean, it's Matt Wagner and Tarantino, so it's going to be so much fun.
Yeah, of course. All right, everyone, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Politician.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing